We are so excited to gather with all of you here today. And when we were thinking about the topic and the theme for today's town hall, we really wanted it to be something around self-care and the restorative theme for the holidays, and in gratitude for each of you and all the hard work that you do throughout the year on behalf of our families. We're so grateful for all of your hard work. And when we think about gathering during the holiday season, where many of us are getting together with our given and our chosen families, it's the family on this Zoom and beyond that's responsible for thousands of families getting to bond together through reading together, sharing that joy of reading, snuggling close, and turning the pages of a beautiful book. And none of that would be possible without all of your hard work. And the reality is 20, 30 years from now, those kids will have children of their own. And their instinct is going to be to grab a book off the shelf and read to them and share that moment. And you are all part of those building blocks for generations of families. And we think that's incredibly special. And I hope that as you move through this hectic period, this stressful period, busy period, that you take a moment to reflect on that incredible contribution that you're making to our communities. The team knows that one of my favorite quotes, I have it up on my by my desk, is how far that little candle throws his beams, so shines a good deed in a weary world. And you all are a candle of light in this weary world for our families. And on their behalf, I want to thank you and wish you all a very happy holiday. And I hope that this session is helpful to you. And with that, I will pass it along to our program director, Kristen.
Thank you so much, Emily. We are very excited to have everyone here today. So we're going to go over more of like housekeeping logistics in the next 15-20 minutes. And then we are going to pass it over to our wonderful guest speaker, who's going to talk about practical mindfulness and resilience for all of you here today, for healthcare professionals. So couple of quick announcements first. Carrie has sent out a new book order survey that is due today. And she also sent out reminders to everyone who has not filled it out individually this morning. So if you received an email from her, or if you want to double check with whoever in your clinic or hospital is responsible for filling out the book orders, definitely do that. We want to get this squared away as soon as possible so we can send you lots of new books. We've shared this out in a couple of other town halls as well as our newsletters. And we just want to do a quick share again because we've developed a new video. So we have books, which is a free ebook resource for us right now. They've given us 75,000 logins. There is absolutely no cap on the number of logins anymore. So if anybody, especially for anybody doing telehealth and can't physically give a book, we strongly recommend using books, or if you're running out of books, this is a great resource. We also understand that an ebook will never replace a physical book, and that is not what we're doing here, so don't worry about that. But they are really high quality ebooks, and it's a really great resource for families that Books has generously donated to us. So quickly, we'll show you on the next slide a couple of the resources that we've developed. One is a flyer that's printed in low color for easy printing, that's been translated into English, Spanish, Arabic, and simplified and traditional Chinese. That's on the back of it. And then Carrie can show you this quick Vox video for how to sign people up.
Welcome to Reach Out and Read of Greater New York's Books Sign Up Training. In this short video, you will learn more about what Books is and how you can distribute this resource to families through your role in the healthcare system. Everyone at the clinic interacting with families can help provide these resources, from medical providers, coordinators, social workers, and front desk administrators. Let's start with some more information about books. Books, a combination of videos and books, is a kid-safe, ad-free streaming library of read-aloud animated storybooks. It's trusted by parents, loved by teachers, and enjoyed by millions of children all around the world. And we're thrilled to be able to offer it free to 75,000 families that we serve with young kids. Books is not a replacement for the physical books that are distributed and enjoyed, but rather an additional resource. Books has donated 75,000 logins specifically for the 3-year-old to 5-year-old children we serve. However, if you are conducting a well child visit via telehealth, we recommend giving families access no matter the age of their child. The same holds true if your site is out of physical books. Currently, Books is only available in English, but they are in the process of translating their ebooks into multiple languages. In the meantime, books are great resources for children and parents and caregivers who are learning English as a second language. Books also provides reading guides for every ebook for parents and caregivers to use when reading with their child together. We recommend that all of our healthcare workers also sign up for their own free Books account to become familiar with it, so you can answer any questions your families may have. Here's how to sign up. We have created a flyer in English, Spanish, Arabic, and Chinese that you can give your families, which shows them how to sign up. Using your phone's camera, scan the QR code. Then fill out the form with your name, email, and use the promo code RORNY. Then select your profile and enjoy books. Some tips on encouraging families to sign up. Work this into your routine with families. For medical providers, help families sign up at the end of their visit. Take the last few minutes to sign them up through their mobile devices or offer any tech support. For front desk administrators, hand out the flyer when families come in and are waiting for their appointment. For telehealth visits, encourage them to sign up while they are on their computer or their device. We are thrilled to be able to offer Books as a fun and engaging learning tool for families in Greater New York. Thank you for helping to distribute this resource and for all you do for the families you serve. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, Carrie Kurjak, at KKURJIAKA at reachoutandreadnyc.org.
Right. Thank you, Carrie. So as she mentioned in the video, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to her or myself or Nardine. And Carrie is also dropping in the flyer in the chat so you can access it. It's also on our website as well and in past newsletters, but we're also happy to send it to you if you can't track it down. So now I'm actually going to pass it on over to Carrie to talk a little bit about book tracking systems.
Thanks, Kristen. So I'm recognizing a lot of the names on the call that I've spoken with actually recently about how you guys are able to track the books that are distributed in the clinics. So every 6 months, as all of our coordinators on the call know, we have a progress report that asks for how many well visits your site has seen, as well as how many books have been distributed. And there are many different ways that we have found that our sites are able to track the books they distribute. Some of the top ones that we've heard are using a sort of tally sheet. So wherever you store the books, you're then marking off when you take a book out to give away, and you're keeping track on that sheet with either tallies or with writing the book's name, some things like that. Some sites have found that really successful. Other sites have integrated it into their EMR system. So when medical professionals are putting in information about families at the end of their visit, they have a system to check a box or some dot phrases to then track that this person has received a book. And then the tech administrators there are able to download a report that shows how many books were distributed through the EMR tracking system. Other sites have used the method of counting the number of books that are in the storage unit at the beginning of the time period. And then when the 6 months are up, they count how many books are there. And that then gives us the number of how many have left the room during that time. So numerous different ways of tracking, and we're trying to do our best to help make sure that whatever method of tracking works for you at your site. We've heard anecdotally from a lot of sites that they could use some support in finding the system that works best for them, and a lot of intrigue about using EMR systems to track this, because it might better work with the workflow and might be more accurate in counting. So we're currently in the middle of an investigation into different EMR systems. We've looked at what you've reported, which sites, sources that you're using, and we're hoping to be able to provide some information for you guys very soon. So with all of that said, I have a quick, maybe even less than 2-minute book tracking survey that I'd love us to fill out right now. I'm going to put it in the chat right now. Tracking survey. It is a Google form, so if you wouldn't mind, if you're on a computer and have access to that chat, doing that now. I'll also send this out in a follow-up email later today. But that would be great to just get more information. A couple quick questions on what sort of tracking system you're using now, if that system is working for you, and if you would like more information on other ways to count the number of books that you're distributing. So very grateful for your support there. I'll also then be reaching out to some sites who have some really outstanding tracking systems to see what we can learn from them. And we're really excited to be able to share more information as this investigation goes on into the upcoming months. So very grateful for your support there. I'll maybe give us like 2 minutes to fill out the survey right now, and then we'll continue on. In the meantime, if anyone has any book tracking questions or any information that they're just thinking right now, feel free to unmute yourself and share, or you can put it in the chat while we take these 2 minutes to fill out the survey. I already see responses coming in, so thank you so much. While we're filling that out, to fill the silence, I'll also just mention that the information that I've gleaned so far has been really interesting, because it really does seem like there's so many diverse systems that really work with each site. And when I was trying to explore like which one's most accurate, there were also very much diverse opinions on which types are most accurate in their tracking information. So at this point, I've got no right or wrong answer. Really just interested in getting some more information and then doing everything we can to support sites with the best system that works for them. All right. Thank you again. Got responses coming in. Feel free to continue to fill out that survey, but I think we will move on with our next exciting updates, passing it back to Kristen for her talk on diversity, equity, and inclusion and the work we're doing there.
Thank you so much, Carrie. So what I am most excited to announce in our announcement section today is the work that we are doing on DEI. So we hired a DEI consultant called Breaker 28, and they are going to be doing several surveys, focus groups, and individual interviews of medical professionals, program coordinators, and families. And we are going to ask for your help in filling out surveys or participating in focus groups and recruiting families as well, starting in early January. When the surveys will go out, but we wanted to give a little preview. We are doing this because we want to make sure that the books and resources and support that we're providing all of you. And I'm sorry, one of my dogs is whining. She's decided that I am no longer allowed to work today. Um, apologies for the background noise. But so we want to make sure that all of the resources, books, and training and any sort of support we're providing you is meeting the needs of your communities, and truly representing the diverse environment that is New York City, as well as our friends in Long Island and the Hudson Valley. And so what will be coming out first will be our medical professional surveys that will go out in early January. And we will also be raffling off some gift cards for participation, hopefully to drum up some excitement, but know that, even if you don't win the gift card, all of your responses are really going to be taken to heart and evaluated and invested, and going to help us decide some planning going forward. And so it's really imperative that we get as many surveys as possible filled out. We're going to have a limited number of focus groups, and we'll reach out about that with more details. Again, you'll get a gift card for participating. And then most importantly, too, we are giving out gift cards to every family that participates in either a survey. For the first 100, we're going to be collecting about 100 of them. So every family that fills out a survey, every family that participates in an individual interview, and those interviews, actually, we're doing those individually for speakers of other languages than English or Spanish. So we'll be offering these interviews in Chinese, Bengali, Haitian Creole, and Arabic, because we want to make sure that we capture those voices as well. And that's not necessarily done in a survey. So we'll be reaching out to you about that. And then also the focus groups for the families as well. And the gift cards are a relatively substantial amount. We're looking around $40 because we know these families' time is valuable. And we want to make sure that, we're paying them for sharing their expertise on their children and their community. We are in the process of doing all of this right now. So we will launch this come January, and you'll get an email on the DEI surveys and focus groups and everything early January. But please just be on the lookout for it and share it with your medical community and families. So we are very, very, very excited to launch that. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. We're more than happy to answer anything, or if you have any feedback or concerns, please, please, please let us know. We love feedback. Okay, now I am incredibly excited to introduce our guest speaker and the main reason that we are all here today. So Dr. Mark Bertin is a board certified developmental behavioral pediatrician. He leads mindfulness classes for medical professionals and incorporates mindfulness into sessions for families. Dr. Bertin has also served on the Reach Out and Read advisory board. And so he is uniquely positioned to be talking to everyone here today about mindfulness and self-care for our Reach Out and Read professionals. So thank you so much for being here, Mark.
You for the opportunity. Hold on, I just want to switch over. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you everyone for being here. I've actually been Reach Out and Read is something I've been involved with in several different ways since the 1990s. So I can talk about that some other time, but it's always good to be able to be back. I think I know I've always wanted to confirm this, but I think the clinic I started in was the first non-hospital based clinic using Reach Out and Read in the country, I think. Um, although, anyway, different day for that story. So I appreciate everyone being here to hear a little bit about mindfulness and resilience during these incredibly challenging times in life, in medicine. And I really want to, from the start, really frame things in two different ways when I talk about mindfulness. One is it's clear that we're not looking to fix anything in particular with mindfulness. And one of the things I'd like to do in making it very practical and accessible for everyone something anyone can use, even in a really busy life, is just recognizing that it's not asking you to be perfect or to do anything in particular. It's really asking us each to look at like what's the most skillful way we can relate to whatever is going on in life. We're knocked off balance, feel like we're spinning out of control, and mindfulness is a practice to help us stay strong and resilient during whatever times. I'm going to get into that more in a moment, but I also want to start with something that was really important to me. Actually, now that I think about it, I started practicing mindfulness coincidentally right about when I started doing Reach Out and Read. So when I was introduced to mindfulness in the Bay Area in the 1990s, um, there's a very fundamental teaching around mindfulness, which is to be skeptical about everything. Whatever you hear, it has to be useful to you or it's not going to have any value. And as you listen to me, as you listen to anyone talk about mindfulness, the question to be asking is it true? Does this make sense? And then it really doesn't matter what I say today unless things make sense. And then you try to start doing some of the things I'm talking about for yourself in everyday life. So very quickly today, obviously, but it's not a very long talk, I want to just very briefly touch on the concept of the challenge of practicing medicine, which no one here needs me to talk about for very long. Obviously, that's incredibly challenging times to be going through things right now. Then the most important thing probably is to find what mindfulness really means, but it's certainly been the subject of too many headlines, been the subject, it's used so many different ways. Talk about how to really understand what it means to practice mindfulness. Touch very briefly on the science, which is really a cool part of doing this nowadays, is the ability to both practice it and also now there's a whole research base behind it, and look at what it might look like in healthcare a little bit. So I'll just start by saying that, everyone has pictures of what medicine's going to look like when they get started. Everyone has their image of what things are going to be like. And whatever it looks like, it probably isn't like that. And I'll read this cartoon since many people are probably are having a hard time reading it on their phones. But it's a nurse saying, we're running a little behind, so I'd like each of you to ask yourself, am I really that sick or would I just be wasting the doctor's valuable time? And, life in medicine gets really complicated and pressured, and hopefully that's never actually happening. But the concept of life's, the whole clinic feeling like it's slightly out of control at times and overly pressured, and we might not have the resources we want, that is, in essence, why the practice of mindfulness was created. And that's what I really want to talk about today. Mindfulness, the premise is that life often is going to go through stretches that knock us off balance. Life is constantly changing. Things are often uncertain. And the whole practice is very reality based. It's asking us, how can we actively build the traits that are going to help us navigate that more easily? So, what then does it mean to practice mindfulness? So this slide, if anyone can't read it, is like a guru on a platform, and behind him it says the path to enlightenment, and somebody in the audience is asking the question, are we there yet? So you might have some views of what you think mindfulness is supposed to be, and one of the most important things in getting started is just dropping all of that. And in fact, in my experience, one of the quickest reasons people quit practicing mindfulness is this perfectionistic view that it's supposed to be some particular thing. Mindfulness never is going to lead to a perfectly still mind. And it's okay if your body's restless, and it's okay if your mind is distracted the entire time you're meditating. All of that is totally normal. What we're working with in mindfulness is more something like this, which is looking at the reality of why does it matter so much that if we pay attention for a moment and check in with how we're living, an awful lot of the time when something's going on, we're not really giving it our full attention or awareness at all. We're doing something unpleasant and thinking of the next pleasant thing. While we're doing the next pleasant thing, we're thinking of the next unpleasant thing. And we're totally missing out on all of life, which is its own little cliche. That's not even the point of mindfulness exactly. But the point is that there's some pretty serious implications to the fact that when we're caught up in stress, when we're caught up in reactivity, you can think about this one in particular in terms of patient care. When we're trying to take care of someone, if our mind is half somewhere else or 90% somewhere else, you can think about it in terms of parenting, not giving your kids full attention. It's just constantly happening. The question to ask yourself is, what are the implications of that? Because the serious goal of mindfulness is to try to develop resilience. Try to look at like how can we navigate the storms? How can we navigate the path in front of us with as much intentionality and as much in line with our own values as is possible? And recognizing the fact that some of the more concrete answers, for example, for what keeps us resilient, aren't rocket science. It's not like I need to give a whole lecture on the science of resilience. That's not the hard question. The more difficult thing to look at is how can I get myself out of this kind of autopilot and readjust myself to knowing what I already know probably works? And when I have more time and a longer talk, certainly one of the things I tend to get lost in a little bit is just, the frustration of so much of the practice of medicine and healthcare, fails to emphasize, we're sort of encouraged to live a lifestyle that just doesn't work, really. I mean, you can't lack sleep constantly. You can't eat poorly constantly. All these basics. And that's so I'm just going to mention them now because it's not the point of today's talk. But certainly part of what keeps you resilient are just these basics of health. It's a perfect reminder during the holiday season, for example, that one of the simplest ways to keep ourselves together and stay resilient during the holiday season is something that when I'm giving parent talks, I sometimes call the modern science of getting back to the basics, because today's talk I want to focus on mindfulness, but it is a good reminder that one way to get out of autopilot is to catch yourself long enough as you go through the holidays, even as you go through these next few weeks of whatever is going to happen around the pandemic, and recognize that a heavy piece of staying resilient is just coming back to like, wait a second, for me, how much sleep do I need to feel good? How much exercise do I need to feel good? Or simple things like gratitude practice or helping other people. All these things are wonderful things to do and also sustain our own resilience. So that's not the talk for today, but it's just a recognition that a big part of mindfulness is this not a meditation practice as much as can we approach life with this sense of awareness? Can we approach life with this sense of, I'm going to come back to the things that keep me resilient as often as possible. And I guess I haven't said yet, by the way, that I'm going to transition in a couple of minutes to a practice. I'm going to do at least a couple of practices today because that is really what mindfulness comes down to. So, from the point of view of mindfulness and this sense of distractibility and autopilot and just not always being paying attention to what's going on moment to moment, that is what I want you to start thinking about as we start talking about what the practice of mindfulness starts with. It's not even the whole of the practice. But what we want to start doing is just examining like what are the implications of living on autopilot. I mean, certainly it has big implications in medicine because if we want to think clearly about each clinical decision we're making and not get just sort of caught up in doing the same thing visit by visit, hopefully we're all skilled at that to some degree already. But it's a skill we can hone. People notice if we catch ourselves and give full attention to whatever's going on next. That always has value. But there's also the autopilot of if I'm driving to work and I actually have a meeting and I'm on autopilot, there's that sense of I'm going to end up at the office even though I'm supposed to be at the meeting. There's a sense also around mindfulness of just recognizing, you start looking at the habits we create and how they get in the way of our well-being. So that, for example, another aspect of resilience, and I just read an article today on Psychology Today on this, is just recognizing that to stay resilient, we need a sense of mental balance, and we need to pay attention to the positive things that are going well in life, in addition to the negative ones. So there's no part of this whole practice that is denying anything. I guess that's another cliche that's worth touching on. Mindfulness doesn't mean it's all good. I used to joke with my wife, one of the reasons we left Berkeley is we got tired of hearing it's all good. It's not always all good. But we want to look at the fact that we need to pay attention and really give our full attention to the positive moments, or we don't get anything from them. So if you have moment, to have a nice cup of coffee in the morning before work, or you're walking outside somewhere, you can take that moment and spend it all caught up in the fact that life is chaos and I'm fearful of the future and I'm regretful of the past and all this stuff. Or you can take that moment and just try to give it your full attention in a way that ends up sustaining you. And the second half of it is that when things go wrong, this sort of sense of rushing reactivity, rumination just perpetuates itself. So that when things are challenging, there's value actually to giving them our full attention too. And there was a Harvard study that looked at that. They looked at what correlates most with happiness once you control for whether something is inherently pleasant or unpleasant. So, it's obviously, fun things are going to be fun regardless, and unpleasant things are going to be unpleasant most of the time regardless. But the nuance was one of the next best predictors of whether someone reported being happy was just whether they were giving life their full attention. Ironically, that study was done through smartphone technology, but that's a whole other discussion. And one thing we can reflect on as New Yorkers, this has come up in New York sports more than once in my lifetime, is the fact that when we're just in reactive mode, which is so much what the politics and online dialogue in this country is right now, no one thinks clearly. No one communicates well. That has a lot of implications in medicine too. It has implications for me, like for example, as a Knicks fan, I don't want to spend too much time on this discussion, but just as an example of how reactivity can be so devastating, forgetting the actual fight I showed on this slide, the only time in my life, my adult lifetime, that the Knicks had any chance of winning anything. All in one moment, it fell apart because somebody got knocked over on the court. In a moment of reactivity, most of the bench for the Knicks came onto the court, to protect someone who wasn't actually in danger. It wasn't like there was actually going to be a brawl or anything on the court with everyone else watching. But there's a rule in the NBA that if you come off the bench, you're immediately suspended for the next game. So in spite of knowing better, the Knicks did not go to the championship that year because all of their stars were suspended. And that's, just one of my favorite New Yorker examples of why it's really valuable, whatever is going on, to try to practice so that we can stay in enough awareness to be making skilled decisions. And what all that means in terms of practicing mindfulness, then, what does it mean, this word mindfulness? So I started with that idea of like, ask yourself, is it true? The definition is just the definition unless it means something to you. So to practice mindfulness, which we're going to do in just a minute, means that we're recognizing the value not of ever being able to do this perfectly, but aiming to more often than not, or as often as we're able, give moment to moment awareness to life, meaning if we can really see what's going on in any moment, that's going to help us live that, navigate that moment more skillfully, get more out of it, handle problems better, with what is called in the practice non-judgmental awareness, which basically means it's so easy to get caught up in our own biases and stories and assumptions, and this is how the world is, or that's how those people are, this, that. It's just trying to see things with actual realistic clarity. So that's why mindfulness is more than meditation, because we're really looking at how are we living life? Can we live life in this way that aligns with this sense of just in a reality-based, compassionate, and objective way, trying to navigate what's ever happening, really for our own good and for the good of everyone around us. And I'm having a moment where I don't remember if I included this slide at the end, so I'll mention it right now, that really the practice is not meant to be a self-help practice, because the assumption truly is, if you think about what this all means in day-to-day life, we've all had moments, hopefully, regularly, but not necessarily, where we just feel at our best. We're coming out of vacation, things just happen to go well for a while, whatever it is. And we know that during those moments, we'll think clearly, more clearly, we'll communicate better, we'll make different decisions than if we live our life just caught up in fear and reactivity. So when we practice that, that by nature helps other people too, which is really the deepest part of the practice, recognizing that because we are bothering to do these practices, that influences the people we're meeting all day long. That's true for all of us, certainly true for parents, healthcare providers, teachers. It's a way of living you can bring to any situation. And on a fundamental level, it's really something that's possible for everyone, because it's not asking you to be different than you are. I once got into not a serious debate, but a sort of joking debate with someone on stage who was, I'm very much from New York and they're very much from the West Coast. And they had made some comment about how practicing mindful communication and sort of in passing said something about, dropping sarcasm. And I sort of said, that's not it. If you're from New York, sarcasm is an important part of life. What mindfulness might be around something like sarcasm is being aware of when you're in the room with someone who might not understand it and maybe reining it in and using it differently. Because I certainly know in my family, we can use sarcasm endlessly all day long and no one's feelings are going to be hurt because everyone gets it, because we're all, our roots will go back to the Bronx. So that's just how it is. And that's mindfulness. It's just awareness. It's not telling you to be different than you are. It's just telling you to come back to your own intentions and values instead of staying caught up in all of the reactivity that like our whole world is being consumed in right now. So before we shift to a very brief mindfulness practice, I'm very mindful of everyone's time today. I just want to say that the real and most important way to reframe this as a practice isn't about the meditation. It's certainly not that sense of like when I'm stressed, I'm going to go meditate, because if you're not familiar with the practice, you're not going to get that much out of it probably. It's not trying to make you relax. It's not trying to make anything specific happen emotionally. Mindfulness is really like a gym program. We can live our lives just caught up in the same mental habit we always are, whatever we're caught up in right now, putting all our energy into, you pick it, fear of the future, terrifying news, yelling at people, not yelling, not fighting for ourselves, shutting down, all of it. Or we can put a little time into trying to build the traits that will help us sustain ourselves day to day. So that really is, if you drop the perfectionism and drop any image of what it's supposed to be, something anyone can do. So I'm going to lead just a very brief couple-minute practice. This is intentional. I'm going to reframe this in a couple of slides of why I'm keeping it brief, besides the fact that I'm limited for time. But it's also something you can do really as needed. So wherever you are right now, except if you're driving, take a moment to find yourself a comfortable posture. Doesn't matter. Could be sitting, standing, could even be lying down, I suppose. And sit up alertly, because if you're slouched or sitting to the side, you're more likely to fall asleep, you're more likely to squirm. So try to find yourself a comfortable and alert upright posture if you're sitting. You notice probably that your mind gets busy even as I start introducing the practice, and that's fine. So lower your gaze now or shut your eyes. And you can begin to notice that there is a physical sensation to breathing. And you might make a mental note with each breath as you observe that of breathing in and breathing out. And as you start right away, just letting go of any sense that you're trying to make anything happen. You can't make yourself relax. You're not trying to think about thoughts, and you're not trying to push your thoughts away. So almost immediately as you start, your mind starts thinking again, and that's fine. You just notice that and come back again to the next breath, breathing in and breathing out. A sense of movement you might notice in your belly or your chest or in the air moving in and out of your nose and mouth. And if you notice a sense of judgment, like this is great, this is terrible, I could never, I'm not good at this, all of those are just thoughts too. You can't be good or bad at this. So noticing all that, just come back again to the next breath. And when you're ready, opening your eyes, returning your awareness to our discussion today. And that's, the practice is often described as simple to describe and hard to do. And lots I could say about that, but there's many different traits you're building just during that little breathing practice. And I'm going to try to leave some time for Q&A, so I'm going to go through the next few slides relatively quickly, and then we'll see what questions people have. But that's an important perspective, is any time during the day you can do that for a couple of minutes. You can sort of hit the reset button and regroup a little bit. And that's a little bit of what we're aiming for around mindfulness. Because in the end, stress is going to keep happening. There's no goal, by the way, of no stress, because stress can be motivating. Stress keeps us on our toes. Too much stress, though, clearly undermines our lives in many, many different ways. Changes how we relate to people, affects our mental health, affects our physical health. And one of the things to know about stress is it, really is almost synonymous with our fight or flight response. So stress triggers us to go into a mode of thinking and a mode of acting where it's all about reactivity. I'm fighting, I'm running away, I'm not thinking clearly, because you don't want to think that much when you're in danger. And yet most of the time in day-to-day life, thankfully, stress is not about anything that's actually physically dangerous. We don't need the actual stress response most of the time to keep us really safe. It's a lot just about what we're thinking about. A thought triggers a string of stress. And one of the most important things to know about that is that stress then perpetuates itself. So when we're thinking certain ways, it changes our emotional state. And then we're in a certain emotional state that changes how we think. That all changes how our body feels. And when our body feels off, that changes our emotional state and changes how we think. And it can just escalate itself for days or weeks on end if we don't try to do something about it. So for today, as just a bullet point of something practical you could take out and just start practicing right away, you can do something that like that little bit of a breathing practice I recognized. Sharon Salzberg was a great teacher of mindfulness. I mean, that's not even the word to capture it. A fantastic teacher of mindfulness, happens to be New York City based too. Um, Sometimes describes it as small doses, many times a day as needed. Meaning you can either let the day go on and on and on with everything escalating all the time. And actually, this ties back to research, which is what I'm going to come to next for a moment, which is to say that um, a researcher recently was trying to explore how much mindfulness is needed to start making a difference in our lives. She concluded in her research it can be as little as 12 minutes a day, and that connects to a different article I've often quoted on a mindfulness teacher who said if you practice this concept of small doses, 1 minute, like for if you just do a minute an hour, which is like a 15 breaths practice all day long, that comes to about 12 minutes a day. Just once an hour, just catch yourself, regroup, settle, get on with your day, has cumulative benefit, because otherwise stress just keeps doing its own thing. And this is certainly a little practice you can start with during, even clearly has value even during a crisis. For healthcare providers specifically, as you start talking about the science of mindfulness, which I don't, again, I'm just going to give a very quick overview today. But it is important to recognize that swamped by stress, especially if you cross the line into burnout, that will change how we practice medicine, empathy and compassion, communication skills. So taking care of yourself isn't just, again, an aspect of self-care. It's a way of providing the best care you're capable of to the people around you. And that's been shown more and more to be valuable from a research perspective. Again, I've said earlier that part of why I love teaching nowadays is that you can sort of talk about mindfulness from the point of view of, do these ideas make sense to you? If these ideas make sense to you, go out and practice them and see what happens. But nowadays, you can also talk about the science of it. And, I already mentioned that I started practicing I feel very fortunate, very coincidentally, right where this sort of exponential curve takes off. So I developed my own mindfulness practice. And then when the research started taking off, I sort of had this epiphany of like, this is really silly to not be using this in medicine. So then I started moving it into my medical practice in different ways. And this slide, which goes through 2013, actually has continued through till today. I have a different, I'm not great with making up graphs like this, but the exponential growth of research has continued. I have a version I realize now that goes through about 2018, but it hasn't slowed down. So mindfulness has been shown to be beneficial with all sorts of things. And the bottom line, short version for today is it's not snake oil, because we're not saying it fixes anything directly. What we're saying are, I think, two things from a research point of view that are important. The first is that there is this concept in brain development now of neuroplasticity, which really relates a lot to why technology can be so harmful to children, for example, because the brain physically changes in reaction to how we think and act and habits. Habits are hard to change because they hardwire. The reason this relates to mindfulness is because if you then practice other habits, those hardwire. So there's one aspect of the research that has to do with neuroplasticity, a little bit of treating the brain like a muscle. But the other one that's really important to recognize is that stress interacts with everything else in life. So instead of feeling like mindfulness is being presented as a cure-all, it's more just a recognition that chronic stress undermines our mental health, chronic stress undermines various medical conditions. And if we can really look at how we're relating even to those things and manage our stress, it has an impact on everything from immune function to depression to chronic pain because of that interrelationship between chronic stress and those other conditions. So for the last few minutes, I want to talk about what that can look like in healthcare. And really, it starts from what I've emphasized a few times already, that if we practice these traits as physicians, which are things like getting out of autopilot, the short version of this talk is lovely, but there's a different version where I can really dig into this even more of looking at like the psychology of cognitive bias, which is just inherently part of human nature, and how awareness can help us, combat things like the negativity bias or the confirmation bias or, overly catastrophic thinking, because there are all these mental habits we all experience parts of, and getting out of autopilot and seeing with clarity, practicing mindfulness helps us break out of those routines. We can practice the skill of even when pressured, trying to stay more responsive and less reactive. And one of the things that is really um, fundamentally different than most of us thought of. I mean, certainly I did growing up, or most of us were presented, this whole concept practicing medicine is that you can actively, through the practice of mindfulness, work on things like communication skills and even directly cultivating compassion, which from a research point of view has been shown to be possible and useful from preschool all the way through adulthood. So the starting point is just recognizing in medicine that we want to get out of autopilot. Changing any habit starts with motivation. You're not going to do anything leaving today unless you're really motivated to make a change. So clearly there's benefits to getting out of autopilot. We all know that. The more important thing is, what can we do with that? The research certainly has started to show that, and this is a newer area, so it's like a subcategory of mindfulness research. So there's less of this research, but the research is starting to show increased patient satisfaction, fewer medical errors in a couple of studies. Actually, I think numbers 2 and 3 on this slide are the same thing, but I just wanted to emphasize it, I guess. I probably should cut one of those bullet points. And then also that overall, again, awareness might, in the long run, with improved healthcare in this way, decrease medical costs overall. Um, but, that's again I think we need to be done by one, and I wanted to leave time for questions. I really just wanted to come back in the end to sort of something practical because, um, the research is the research, and defining mindfulness is defining mindfulness. And, that's a quick overview of something that people have written, really long books about. So there's a lot more to be explored. The overall practice of mindfulness is really one, which has at least three parts when you look at it in the bigger sense. There's an aspect of it that has to do with staying settled, meaning we can stay, caught up in that sense of autopilot or come back. There's a really important aspect to look at during this crisis that we're living in, that there's a big aspect of mindfulness practice that directly is building patience, resilience, really. Because if you think about what's going on during meditation practice, what are we doing? Like for those 10 minutes, there's a second point I want to make, but starting with, for those particular 10 minutes, what we're saying is whatever is going on for these 10 minutes, I'm going to do my best not to react to it. And we're building that ability to do that. We might be stressed, we might be unstressed. We might be feeling good physically, we might be feeling bad physically. Someone might be annoying us, no one might be annoying us. Whatever it is, for 10 minutes, we're just doing our best to just be there. And that, I hate that cliche, but to be patient with it, to just sit there. And that has a lot of value. So we can cultivate that trait, that ability to just sit with our anger without being, mindlessly reactive and getting kicked out of the most important game of our career, that type of thing. So that's one part of it. The second thing I wanted to say about mindfulness is it's also meant to be very active. That's a cliche that it's not. The goal is because we're building those traits, we then can see what's meant to be done in any situation. So a famous teacher of mindfulness, Sylvia Boorstein, I heard give a talk recently, and she sort of said mindfulness is directly an activist practice because if you slow down and look at how the world is right now, you better think there's things to be done. So it's not about being passive and being okay with everything. It's about seeing clearly and most precisely what we want to be doing to change the world in a way, because if we do it in a reactive way, it often escalates things. So it's meant to be proactive. And then the third part of it has to do with that sense of really, being able to come back to our best values, which typically do have things like compassion in them. Like when we're able to catch ourselves, that's something that develops naturally and can be cultivated directly. So mindfulness practice includes all these different things, but we also are very busy. And I just wanted to add one other commonly taught healthcare practice and then pause for questions, really. So you can do that brief meditation as many times as you like. Obviously, if you want to, you can do meditation for longer. Meditation isn't mindfulness. Meditation is the tool with which we build the traits for living with mindfulness. So it's a different concept. But the doorknob practice in medicine is one you can do constantly if any habit takes some remembering. And it basically means anytime you put your hand on a doorknob throughout the whole day, going into the next meeting, going to the next patient visit, whatever it is, the practice doesn't add any time to your clinical day. It's just stop for a moment. You can do this right now while you're all listening to me. I'm sure your brains are starting to jump forward, or they're caught up in something I said before that annoyed you, or whatever else it was. So stop for a moment, just right now. And then the second part of this practice is take a few breaths with that sense of mindfulness, with purpose. So try as best you can for 2 or 3 breaths. Just focus on physically that movement in your body. And then the O stands for observe, which is like a check-in. What's going on mentally for me and what's going on around me. And then the P stands for, there's lots of good words that start with P. It usually stands for pick how to proceed or purposely proceed. But the point is the P stands for like, okay, now that I caught myself for a second, what's the next best thing to be doing? And you can take that into patient care, recognizing that whatever's going on before and after any particular visit, you can try to use this one practice to give full attention to even just a few minutes, if that's all you have, in that next room. And this is a particularly valuable practice we can each bring into our clinical day. For anyone who anything clicked today, as they end, I would say, there's many different ways to get started. All the stuff I touched on today, a lot of the stuff I touched on today would kind of fall in this grab bag of just like everyday mindfulness, just like trying to get started with it by choosing to pay attention to a meal or choosing to try the doorknob practice. The formal practice of meditation is, the heart of it, but it's not because anything's supposed to happen while you're meditating. It's because meditating builds the traits that you're going to take back to everyday life, and that's best done usually, with some sense of structure. So there's a whole page on my website about classes, books, you can use online apps, whatever it is. The thing is just get started, just do it, don't judge it. It's just a practice to build traits that will help you stay resilient, whatever's going on in life. So I'll end there. That's my website if anyone wants to go to the mindfulness page. It's developmentaldoctor.com, and there's a whole section which has, books and apps and all that type of stuff. And I think um, I timed this just as I wanted to. So there's about 5 minutes for questions. So that may be the quickest version I've given in this ever. So I'm curious what people thought about that and what questions people might have. And if there's questions in the chat, does someone want to read them or you want me to go read them or how do you want to do this? I'm happy to do it either way. Why don't
Um,
I open the chat and see, has anyone?
there are no questions in the chat right
Okay.
now.
Well, Carrie had a comment, a couple. And there are a couple of comments in the chat. Does anyone have any other questions? I'll go back to the chat if people don't have questions. How about that?
So, hi, I'm Dr. Tsapelis from
Hi.
Maimonides.
Hi,
That
how are
was a
you?
great talk. I am good at it. It's Friday. I'm awesome.
Yeah.
Um, More comments than questions. I
Hmm.
love this because for the longest, I've been at this for a while. For the longest time since residency, the big things that I've always said to my juniors was, you can't stress over everything. You have to choose your stressors. And you have to find balance. It's not always going to be 50-50. It may be 70-30. It may be 80-20, but you have to carve out a little bit of time for yourself. And it's actually one of the things for the last 15 years I say to the incoming residents during the orientation. And I think there's such a big push to do. And I'm like, you get to take 5 minutes for yourself, and it's okay. And it's something, at least until recently, that medical schools don't even,
No.
you push, stop, breathe, and then go. I actually have a small bottle of lavender essential oil right by my computer screen on my desk next to my chocolate bowl. So a
Yep.
couple times
So
a day, I'll stop and I'm like, and I go.
yeah, I'm one of the best. My there was somebody who told me something similar when I was starting, and I often quote it, which is a good friend of mine who was a year ahead of me told me, whatever happens you do during medical school and residency, find one thing that keeps you sane, and no matter what happens, don't let go. So for me, it was ultimate frisbee, but it could be anything for anyone. But like however busy it gets, just you're going to make that time, and it's so important, I think, to emphasize that for all trainees. And then the mindfulness practices can be sort of folded into that because, like, even on a night's call, you might be able to do a 15 breaths practice or even 5 minutes in the call room, and do all these things that help you, resettle yourself, regather yourself. Um, the that I think Carrie's two comments, or the second comment from Carrie about clearing your head. That's a vital thing to drop if you're ever going to practice mindfulness. You're not thinking about thinking, and your head is never going to be clear. The concept is more one of monkey mind. Your mind is jumping around constantly. We tend to overbelieve our own thoughts, so it's making some thoughts that are productive and awesome, and some thoughts that are totally random, and other thoughts that are just sort of the circular, habitual, neurotic, exhausting thoughts that we all have. And the practice isn't to erase all that. But Joseph Goldstein talks about it, who's a famous teacher of mindfulness, of like getting off the train quicker. We train ourselves to notice like, oh, wait, I was going down that rabbit hole again. And now I'm going to come back and I'm just going to do 10 breaths, or I'm going to come back and just talk to a friend, or and you just start breaking these loops quicker and quicker. But the subtlety, the reason I think it's so practical is you're not trying to make them go away. They might never go away fully, but you're just not taking them so seriously almost. You're just going, oh, right, that's just me being all. I mean, it depends. If there's some people talk about it as also like have a sense of humor about it, of like, oh, right, that's just me doing that, like, obsessing thing again.
Don't
And I'm not,
allowing
you know,
yourself to be consumed by it.
yeah, and I'm not, by the way, dismissing, like, I know there's different levels of obsession. I'm not talking about clinical diagnosis, but I'm
Right.
talking
Right.
about
No, 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 of course.
the day-to-day neurotic stuff we have. You can shift your relationship to that sense of like, oh, that's just my self-critical voice again. I'm just going to take a breather now. But you're not going to squash it. Squashing thoughts and emotions, never really works. So,
But I love that
so
it's being
thank you.
formalized because everybody is all these years are like, you're crazy. I
Right.
go, no, no. I
Mm,
would walk in, I'd be
mm,
like, we can't do
right.
all of it and it's okay. So now,
Yeah.
yay, everybody's in my crazy world. I'm good
Yeah.
with it.
Thank you for sharing that. I have a couple minutes. I don't know when people need to leave exactly, but do other people have any questions or comments or practicalities to ask about? Okay. Well, thank you for that comment, and thank you, Carrie, for yours, and everyone for being here. So, happy holidays. Good luck navigating all this. And definitely, like Dr. Savelis was, I think, how do you say it? Sapelis?
Sabellis.
Tapellis, so like Dr. Tapellis was saying, definitely as you're navigating it all, find those couple of moments, find those couple of things, and it really does have additive benefit. I mean, I do think, we're driven by this culture we're in to like always be looking for that next thing that's going to make us happy and feel better, and there are things, but a lot of the things that fundamentally work really is that idea of like the science of getting back to the basics and really looking at like how can we, because it's not the concept that's hard. It's looking at what are the barriers and trying to problem solve and create habits that get us back to what we really do know will work.
So
So,
one plug for my chocolate bowl, I actually have it on my desk aside for myself. Every time the
yeah,
residents come in and take a piece of chocolate, they have to tell me a fact about themselves. And they look at me, I go, because we're all so much more than just our jobs. And we tend to forget that as well.
yeah, thank you. So that's a great point to end on. So thank you for that. And hopefully I'll see you all again sometime.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank
We
you.
truly
All right.
appreciate your time.
You're
Happy
welcome. All right.
holidays,
Take care,
everyone.
everyone. Happy
Happy,
holidays.
merry
Bye-bye.
everything.